Emily was just 2 years old when her mother, Jessica, trusted her with Mark, her new boyfriend, but what was meant to be a simple day of babysitting turned into a horrifying tragedy that would shock the entire community. 2-year-old Emily woke up early that morning to the gentle sunlight spilling into her room, the soft chirping of birds creating a peaceful background. Her room was scattered with her favorite toys, tiny stuffed animals, colorful blocks, and a small tricycle that squeaked when pushed across the floor. She sat up in her crib, rubbing her eyes, unaware that this day would be anything but ordinary. Her mother, Jessica, was in the kitchen preparing for work, glancing at the clock nervously while making coffee. She had recently started dating Mark, a man Emily had only met a few times, and today he was tasked with watching her while Jessica ran errands. Mark appeared cheerful at first. He smiled at Emily as she played with her blocks, stacking them carefully and then knocking them down in a fit of giggles. He prepared her breakfast with a sense of responsibility, making sure the pancakes were warm and soft, and even offered her some fruit on the side. At that moment, everything seemed normal, even pleasant. Emily's tiny laughter filled the house, and Mark's voice echoed as he tried to keep her entertained. But subtle signs began to emerge, ones that would later seem ominous in hindsight. Emily's favorite blanket, the one she clutched tightly when nervous, was nowhere to be found. She clutched a corner of her shirt instead, her small hands trembling slightly. Occasionally, she would glance at Mark with a hesitant look, her eyes wide and unsure. He seemed oblivious or indifferent to these moments, focusing instead on the tasks around the house. The morning passed slowly. Emily played on the carpet while Mark tiddied up, moving from one chore to the next with an air of efficiency. The sunlight shifted, casting long shadows across the living room, but the house remained unusually quiet, apart from the occasional squeak of a toy or the rustle of paper as Mark moved around. Outside, neighbors went about their routines, unaware that behind the closed door, a young child's sense of safety was being compromised. The clock ticked on, marking the progression of a day that seemed ordinary on the surface but was quietly building toward tragedy. Emily's small world, filled with laughter and play just moments before, was beginning to feel unpredictable. By the time midday approached, the atmosphere had subtly shifted, carrying a tension that neither Emily nor Jessica could fully understand. What started as a simple morning of babysitting would soon spiral into something devastating, changing lives forever. By early afternoon, the house had taken on a different feeling. The bright, cheerful morning light had shifted into a harsher glare through the windows, and the once lively room felt heavier, almost stifling. Emily, still full of restless energy, wandered from one corner of the living room to another, her tiny hands clutching toys she had scattered across the floor. Mark's mood had subtly changed too. What had seemed like patient attentiveness in the morning now carried a tension that was hard to ignore. He moved quickly, sometimes too quickly, reacting sharply to Emily's curiosity and noise. Emily's laughter, which had been light and joyful, now sounded more uncertain, punctuated with whimpers when Mark became irritated. He attempted to redirect her attention, showing her books and toys, but his frustration sometimes slipped through. The towering stacks of blocks Emily had built earlier were knocked over in a moment of impatience, causing her to squeal and flinch. The incident was small, but it cast a shadow over the day, the first hint that this afternoon would not follow the predictable rhythm of normal play. Hours passed in a blur. Emily's cries occasionally echoed outside the house, but neighbors assumed it was the usual noise of a toddler at home. Inside, the tension grew. Mark alternated between distraction and sharp responses, leaving Emily in moments of unsupervised play while he moved about the kitchen and living room. Objects that should have been out of reach, a hot pan, heavy utensils, were left nearby, and Emily's tiny hands occasionally touched them, drawing quick, reactive corrections from Mark that seemed more harsh than careful. The house felt increasingly oppressive, the walls closing in with the weight of quiet unease. Emily, unable to understand the change in the energy around her, became more fussy and demanding, which only seemed to fuel Mark's growing impatience. Each minute seemed longer than the last, filled with small, troubling incidents that would later form the grim puzzle investigators would try to solve. By mid-afternoon, Emily's tiny body began to show signs of stress: pale cheeks, a subdued demeanor, and a quietness that was unusual for her age. The afternoon, which began like any other, had gradually shifted into something tense, unpredictable, and dangerous. Every small decision, every moment of inattentiveness, began stacking toward a day that would end in tragedy. No one outside the house realized the severity of the situation, and within those walls, a young child's life was teetering on the edge, trapped in a dangerous silence that would soon erupt into disaster. As the afternoon wore on, the tension inside the house escalated. Emily had grown quieter, her energy fading, but her tiny body was still restless, moving hesitantly from one toy to another. Mark's impatience, once subtle, had become more pronounced. He moved around the room with quick, jerky motions, often startling Emily as he adjusted the furniture or tried to clean up her scattered toys. What had seemed like minor frustration earlier now took on a darker edge, leaving the house heavy with unease. At one point, Emily stumbled over a small pile of blocks, and Mark's reaction was sharp and sudden. Though no one outside the walls could hear it, the air in the room thickened with tension. Emily clutched her stomach and whimpered, her tiny body trembling with a mix of fear and confusion. Her cries were softer now, almost cautious, as though she sensed the change in the adult who had been tasked with keeping her safe. Minutes turned into an hour, and Emily's condition worsened. She became unusually pale, her lips a faint blue, her movements slow and hesitant. Mark's frustration grew as she refused to cooperate with him, but instead of seeking help or calling for emergency services, he made decisions that would later shock investigators. Desperation took over, and actions that seemed small at the moment picking her up roughly, leaving her alone for moments at a time stacked together with disastrous consequences. By the time emergency responders arrived, it was already too late. Emily's tiny body was unresponsive, the signs of trauma clear to anyone trained to recognize them. The medical team worked quickly, but the reality of the situation could not be undone. Emily was pronounced dead at the scene, a young life cut short in a way that seemed impossible to comprehend. Forensic examination later revealed injuries inconsistent with normal play. Bruises and patterns in areas of the body suggested repeated mishandling, and some marks indicated deliberate harm rather than an accident. Investigators pieced together the timeline, noting how each hour of the afternoon had escalated from routine care to a dangerous, life-threatening environment. The shock rippled through the community. Friends, neighbors, and family struggled to understand how a day that began with laughter and play had ended in such tragedy. What had appeared as a normal afternoon had transformed into a preventable disaster, leaving behind grief, guilt, and questions that demanded answers. The investigation was only beginning, and the story of what happened inside that quiet house was far from over. Once the authorities arrived and the scene was secured, a careful investigation began. Detectives meticulously examined every corner of the house, looking for evidence that could explain how a 2-year-old had died under the care of someone trusted to protect her. Photographs were taken of the living room, kitchen, and bedroom, capturing the scattered toys, overturned furniture, and other subtle clues that spoke volumes about the day's events. Each bruise, mark, and small injury on Emily's body was carefully documented, revealing a chilling pattern of mistreatment that investigators could not ignore. Mark quickly became the focus of the investigation. His accounts of the day were inconsistent, with gaps and contradictions that immediately raised suspicion. Detectives compared his story with forensic evidence, looking for discrepancies. Security cameras from nearby streets and neighboring homes were reviewed, revealing glimpses of the day that contradicted his statements. Each piece of evidence painted a picture of a day spiraling out of control, showing how minor frustrations escalated into life-threatening negligence. The forensic report shocked even experienced investigators. Some injuries were consistent with falls or typical toddler accidents, but others suggested repeated force or rough handling. The pattern of bruising, along with Emily's weakened condition, indicated that she had been subjected to harm over several hours, possibly more than one instance of rough contact. Experts explained that a child as small as Emily is extremely vulnerable to even minor trauma, and the accumulation of stress, neglect, and mishandling could quickly turn fatal. Interviews with neighbors and family members added more context. They described Mark as someone who sometimes displayed a short temper, though they had never imagined it could result in this level of harm. Jessica's friends and relatives expressed disbelief and grief, struggling to reconcile the man they had seen in public with the danger he posed behind closed doors. The investigation revealed that many of the warning signs, minor frustrations, quick tempers, moments of rough handling had gone unnoticed until it was too late. As detectives pieced together the timeline, it became clear that Emily's death was preventable. The tragedy highlighted a failure to recognize danger in what initially seemed like ordinary circumstances. Each discovery deepened the horror, showing that what appeared to be a day of normal babysitting had been a carefully concealed progression of neglect and harm. The case sent ripples through the community, raising urgent questions about trust, vigilance, and how a small child's safety could be overlooked until disaster struck. Months after Emily's tragic death, the legal system took center stage. Mark was arrested and charged with manslaughter and child abuse. The court proceedings were intense, exposing every detail of that fateful day. Evidence from the investigation, the bruises, the timeline of events, and witness testimonies painted a chilling picture that left jurors and spectators in shock. Mark's defense attempted to minimize the severity of his actions, but the overwhelming evidence of negligence and harm could not be ignored. The trial was a painful experience for Emily's family, especially her mother, Jessica. She had trusted someone she believed could care for her child, only to have that trust betrayed in the most devastating way. While she faced public scrutiny for leaving Emily in Mark's care, her grief was unmistakable. Family and friends supported her through the proceedings, grappling with the pain and anger that came with losing a young child so suddenly and tragically. The court case revealed patterns of behavior that had gone unnoticed before. Investigators and experts described how seemingly small incidents, moments of impatience, rough handling, and leaving Emily unsupervised accumulated into a fatal situation. The trial emphasized the importance of vigilance when leaving children in the care of others, particularly adults who have not been thoroughly vetted or observed in responsible caregiving situations. The verdict brought a sense of closure for some, but left a lasting scar on the community. Mark was found guilty, and his sentencing reflected the seriousness of his actions. While justice could never bring Emily back, the ruling sent a strong message about accountability and the consequences of negligence. It reminded everyone of the fragility of life and the responsibility adults carry when caring for children. In the months following the trial, memorials were held in Emily's honor. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers shared their condolences and created initiatives to raise awareness about child safety and proper caregiving practices. Her story became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the importance of vigilance, responsibility, and the devastating consequences when trust is broken. Emily's life, though tragically short, sparked conversations and actions aimed at preventing similar tragedies. The memory of her innocence lingered, urging the community to protect its most vulnerable members. Though the grief remained, Emily's story left a mark. It served as a stark reminder of how quickly a day of normal routines could turn into disaster, and how the choices of one adult could change a child's life forever. Her brief life became a powerful lesson in awareness, caution, and the enduring need for justice.